Hi there and welcome to the latest edition of the Gersnet Weekly Podcast, the independent Rangers podcast, which is brought to you by fans for fans and where the content is free. It is episode 150 of the Gersnet Weekly Podcast. I'm your host, Colin Armstrong. As I say every week, guys, it's not just the pod that we have here on Gersnet. We have a history archive on the website. There's the forums, articles, match previews, match reports, all that kind of stuff. Frankie's obviously got his social media as well, so get yourself onto that. If you like what we do here at Gersnet, then please subscribe to the YouTube channel, put the word out there on social media, tell everyone about us. We're live tonight and we're late, which is all my fault. Well, it's all my IT's fault. I had a major IT catastrophe tonight, so we're running slightly late. But we're live. The pod will be available to download and stream on a variety of platforms from tomorrow, including Acast, iTunes, YouTube, Castbox, Stitcher, Spotify, all your usual places, guys. So I'll bring in my guests for tonight. First and foremost, Iain, how are you doing?
Not too bad. I thought I had problems. My bulb in my room went just before we came on, so I thought I was in trouble. But compared to you, I'm fine.
Oh, it's honestly, it's not just been one of the days, it's been one of the weekends, if I'm being honest with you. So it's one of those. But sorry for keeping you up late, you know what I mean? We'll probably get this pod finished at about 1 a.m.
It's your dial-up internet that's causing the problems, isn't it?
That's what it is, aye. It's because I'm in, like, you know, this rural field somewhere, but we're not going yet. And also joining us is Patrick Kasky. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks for asking. I'm equally in unperfect circumstances since my laptop is broken in for repair and my internet's not great. But besides that, I'm doing well. Football wasn't the best, but quite annoyingly, Scotland's cricket game was on at the same time as well, so I had to pick one. And obviously, Scotland lost and Rangers drew, so it's not been a good day.
Yeah. My laptop's broke as well because I just launched it out the window about 15 minutes ago and had to find a replacement. So, on to today's events, guys. I think we can all agree. Disappointing, really disappointing. You know, a real opportunity when you consider, you know, Hearts dropped points at Ross County yesterday. Hibs dropped points. I think they were playing St Mirren. Celtic obviously beat today by Livingston. A real opportunity to extend the lead at the top. We went top again today, but we're only top by a point. It could have been 3 and we could have been 6 ahead of Celtic. And if it hadn't been for the Dundee United game, you know, if we'd won all our games, we would currently be 9 points ahead of Celtic. So, Iain, it kind of feels, even although we have sort of, you know, extended our lead a wee bit, it feels like a great opportunity missed to further extend it, you know, and pull further away from Celtic. And to put 3 points between us and Hibs and Hearts.
Yeah, frustrating. I mean, I think that's the main word, really, isn't it? I mean, opportunity missed, as you say. Whether, you know, at the end of the day, Celtic are probably going to be our closest challengers. So we had the opportunity today to pull further ahead of them at a very early stage of the season, and you know, missed that opportunity. We're struggling generally to find form. I mean, I wouldn't say we're necessarily playing particularly badly. Just not getting across the line really the way that we possibly were last season. So, you know, as I say, frustrating more than anything. And I mean, there's obviously, I think, biggest problem is that a lot of players aren't performing at the top of their abilities, and when you've got the majority of your team not playing at the best of their abilities, then you know it's not sustainable. So hopefully it's a temporary thing. We'll start to pick up form and start playing better. The bonus is, as you say, is that we're top of the league and a point clear. So you know that's the positive.
Patrick, it's you know. I think we spoke about this last week. I can't remember who was on, but you know, the one at St Johnstone, we mentioned that, you know, we had the 85% possession, and then, you know, 5 minutes into the second half, we're 1-0 down, and it kind of feels like that again today. You know, 24 shots on target. 24 shots, 7 of those on target. We've had 70%, 68% of possession. You know, everything about the stats, 13 corners to 3, you know, everything about the stats points to Rangers dominating that game. They've had one shot on target. and they've came away with a point. It feels like it's the age-old problem, really. If you don't score enough goals and you can't defend properly, you don't win football matches. Now, I wouldn't want to say the Rangers are in crisis, but there definitely does seem to be a trend here. In that final third, we don't seem to be as cutting as we were last season, and we're certainly not defending the way we were last season. We're conceding goals quite a lot at the moment. So a bit of a concern, I would say.
Yeah, I think obviously last season is a bit of a tough barometer to go by, but it's the exact same group of players. That's often been a criticism. Some people have posed the lack of transfer activity in and out this summer. So there can't be any sort of discussions over the lack of continuity, chemistry, or adjustment to the sort of play style. But yeah, it's the second game in a row. I think Jared mentioned today in the press conference that we've conceded one goal, whilst the opposition has only managed one shot on target. As well, we managed, as you said, 24 shots, 19 of which were inside the box, and managed only one goal. I think a lot of people came out saying the second half was put on the handbrake. Perhaps it was less aggressive, less clinical, and I agree with that. But we shouldn't be in the position with the chances we had in the first half where we go in with only a 1-goal lead. We were probably worth a 2-goal lead at least at half going into the half. And Roof had the key chance just at the beginning of the second half, but with 24 shots, you'd expect at least more than 1 goal. Expected goals had us at 2.88, which I think is probably fair. That Motherwell at 0.8, I think no one would have really complained if for a 3-1. I think one needs to point it out. I think the referee had a terrible game today, and I think Motherwell fans would probably be a bit more aggrieved than we would, even though he was quite poor. And at both halves, called it quite at weird times when we were just outside their box. So that makes you think maybe we must have shot and maybe we score a goal, but it's a bit unlikely. But I think Motherwell obviously go away the happiest, but they'll be a bit aggrieved at both our first goal, which seemed offside, and a penalty shot that they probably should have got. But then equally, we had a penalty shot turned down. So definitely not a good game for the officials. And it's getting to this interesting time where we're 6 games in. I think it's 11 if you count all competitions. And we're either falling victim to variance and performing under what's expected of us, or it will be a sort of emerge into a concerning trend that we'll have to buckle. I think that we'll be able to tell that when we get into sort of once we play everyone in the league, and once we play Sparta, Prague and Brøndby in the Europa League. And I think if we continue like this, it'll be very concerning and might call for some sort of tactical personnel shift. But I would back the team to sort of get out of the rut. As you said, the stats were overwhelming in our favour, and I expect us to sort of get some sort of regression to the mean. And if not, that's seriously concerning.
Iain, I mean, on the goal, I mean, I have to agree with Patrick. It did look slightly offside, seeing the replays. But it was good to see that Fashion Sakala got the goal. Again, going back to sort of previous shows and the sort of stuff that we've discussed there has been a feeling recently that all the players that have come in the summer, we're approaching October, and none of them have really had a major impact. The one that's probably had the most game time is Lundstrom, and he struggled a wee bit. Looked a wee bit better on Thursday night there, but it still feels like he's got a wee bit to go. And the rest have hardly had any impact at all. So even though he did look sort of slightly offside, it was good to see him get a start. Obviously based on Morelos carrying a slight knock, but good to see him get a goal. You're hoping that he would kick on from that now.
I mean, for strikers, that's really that's what gives them their impetus, isn't it? Is getting the goals, and they get the confidence, and that confidence breeds confidence and gives them hopefully better performances as we go along. I mean, the biggest problem, I suppose, is the lack of game time with these guys. So it's hard to judge them. It's hard to judge them on what they're doing, and it's hard to say, they're not playing well, because they need time to settle in. They need to get to know their teammates, how they play, how Rangers play, and what's expected of them, etc. I suppose the concern is that, why are they not getting the game time? And does that mean that Gerrard doesn't fancy them and doesn't see doesn't think that they would fit into what his plans are? That's the concern, I suppose, in the bigger picture, because doesn't matter if that turns out to be the case, then they're never going to settle into the team, no matter how many games they get, and they're probably not going to get those games. So yeah, I think Yeah, getting the goal definitely is the main thing for him. I thought he looked quite sharp in the game against Real Madrid, and the finish he had in that game was good. So I had high hopes at that point, but it hasn't really kicked on for him yet. But I can understand why he's not getting being the first pick. But with Morelos up against him, I think my biggest or slightly bigger concern is the form of the players who we had relied on last season so much, and they're the ones that don't seem to be hitting the heights, and you wonder whether that's just a case of after it's a hangover from last season in some ways, and judging with some of the celebrations, it might have been literally a hangover for some of them still, but when you do reach that peak level, it's quite difficult, I would imagine, to sustain that for the following season, and no matter what there is to achieve, it's got to be a come down in some respects, because you've focused entirely in reaching that level that brought the league title, and there's all the hysteria and all the euphoria after that, and then there is a bit of a come down after that. So you would hope that would be a temporary thing, and as the season progresses, as long as we don't sort of slip too far, then they'll start picking up again and get their confidence back. But I mean that I'm a wee bit more concerned about the players that are there that we should be relying on, and maybe there's just needs a bit more freshening up in terms of giving other players a chance.
Hey Patrick, speaking about one of the players that sort of came in enforced through injury with the announcement last week with Hollander. A lot of talk today around Jack Simpson, and I think there's been a lot of talk about him in general. Since he's came in, the general consensus that I'm seeing, and certainly it's a consensus that I would go with, is he's not hit the required level in his performances so far. Today he was caught out in the first half of that sort of big route one punt up the park, and Motherwell nearly scored for it. McGregor has to sort of scramble it away. I can't remember the striker who was coming in at the time. But it really was kind of route one football. And Motherwell's goal today, the equaliser from Woolery, his defending there isn't great, I don't think. Now, he's not had a huge amount of game time. So I don't want to write the boy off. I've seen plenty, in my lifetime anyway, I've seen plenty of players come in who have not looked the part in the early stage of their career, that have kicked on, but the signs so far are not good. And given the injury to Hollander, have you got concerns about having to rely on him over the next 2 or 3 months until Hollander's fit again?
Somewhat. I think he wasn't that impressive today. I think he came for a bit too much criticism, if you're using Twitter as a barometer to see the general sort of support. And I think the substantiated claims that we shouldn't have loaned out Katic and should have loaned out Simpson instead are quite... Katic is most likely a superior player, but Katic has already shown that he's of a Rangers level, but he needs consistent game time to sort of re-emerge and rejuvenate at that level, whereas Simpson is still testing out to see if he is Rangers quality, and currently I think he has 12 or 13 appearances. The jury's probably out on it, but I think the situations are different. I think it's unfair to say that Simpson should have gone on loan and Katic should have signed, or should have stayed rather. But yeah, I do think just the nature of the numbers with Hollander out to what seems to be December. Goldson, who is always available, and you'd be surprised if he isn't till December. The little COVID mishap, but that only had for one game. But when you just look at the pure numbers, you would expect someone from the B team, most likely Leon King, to play some sort of role within the next few months. You'd be surprised if Balogun, who seems somewhat injury prone, is able to sustain a long time on the pitch. Simpson as well, whether that be injury induced, a lack of confidence, or just form, you'd expect him not to be in the side the entire time. But there's some shouts for Bassi. He played intermittently at centre back at youth level. But yeah, I think envisioning when George Edmondson left and obviously Katic left on loan, you wouldn't have sort of envisioned this sort of circumstances, albeit Hollander is notoriously injury prone, but has been quite lucky at Rangers. This is his first major injury, if I'm correct. I think it is. But yeah, I think it's not ideal, but I think Balogun and Goldson are a decent partnership. Against Lyon, I think they were both quite good. I think both goals were not due to the fact of either of them. In fact, Goldson's good work was perhaps the reason for the own goal, because he managed to clear it back onto Tavernier. But it's not the ideal situation. But at an SPFL level, I think the four of Balogun, Goldson, Simpson, and whether that be Leon King, is more than enough to sustain some sort of form for the next 2 months. In the European aspect, it's a bit shaky, but Brøndby and Sparta are both quite toothless in front of goal, it's seen so far. So I think it's obviously not ideal, but I think the Helander missing isn't as large as some people would like to think, but everyone has an opinion, and no opinion is more right than others.
I mean, the guy's, to be fair to him, he's our basically our fifth choice centre back. So there's a reason for that, so we shouldn't be, expecting too much from him. I mean, that's where he is. I think he'll, he's not done brilliantly, but I think he'll be reliable enough, and given a bit more time, a bit more understanding, some, with whatever partner he's put alongside, which is probably going to be Goldson, then I think he'll do okay. But I don't think he'll be the first choice.
Iain, I'm glad this question's come to you, because you're the more senior of the guests on tonight. I don't know if this is how you feel. Like for me, when I look back on seasons when we've had excellent seasons, like the first one I can remember is sort of 86, 87. 92, 93 is obviously a season that stands out. I think Dick Advocaat's second season, 99, 2000, another outstanding season. It seems to me the season after those great seasons, now obviously if you've had a great season, it's hard to maintain those levels, but it does feel that there's always a bit of a drop off. In 86, 87, we lost the league the following season. In 92, 93, the following season we had a great run in the Champions League in 92, 93, out in the first round in 93, 94. And even though it was the same players, we just never seemed to scale the same heights. And it was the same in sort of 99, 2000. Rangers, I think they finished about 25 points ahead of Celtic that season. And then Martin O'Neill arrived, and all of a sudden the roles were reversed a wee bit. Is that how it feels now? I mean, we went unbeaten last season. It was one of the things I said to myself, so, you've got to temper your expectations. You're not going to get another season like that, maybe ever again. You know what I mean? It was such a high standard. But the drop-off does feel a bit more significant than you would hope for, in the terms of what we were talking about earlier on. We're not scoring as much, and the defensive side of things is really shaky. Is that how it feels to you, that it's similar to those sort of previous seasons, that we've had really high heights and then all of a sudden we're down quite a bit from those heights?
No, I mean, I think you're right. Obviously, everything you said there's right. The reasons, there's probably lots of different reasons for all of those situations. I mean, in 87, would butcher out for much of that season, when he was the mainstay of the team the season before, so that was a major factor that season. So there's always factors. I suppose the question is whether or not we are massively down in terms of performances than we were last season. I can remember quite a lot of times coming onto the podcast and we were talking about, well, we're doing okay. We're getting, we're not playing brilliantly, but we're getting results. So the difference this season seems to be that we're maybe playing at the same level, but not getting the goals or the results that we were getting last season. And that's, in some ways, that can just be down to good luck or bad luck. You hit 20 shots. One game you might score 3 of them. One game, somehow we're only scoring 1 of them, and that. You can't really. I don't know how you can. You can't make a player score a goal. So, it's if your performance overall is the same, and you're creating as many chances, then obviously there's got to be something done to get the goals and the ball in the back of the net. But I don't know whether the performance levels are massively down. I just think everything's not just clicking the way we would like it, and I don't necessarily think it's a massive time for panicking in any way, shape or form. I don't think we're looking at, like the Martin O'Neill season or the season after Advocaat's second season. I mean, that there was massive cause for concern that season. You could see it right from the very start of the season. There was behind the scenes problems. There was players that were brought in who just weren't up to the standard that were needed at that time, and Advocaat himself was sort of seemed to lose it a bit that season as well. So there was lots of things happened that year. I don't see that this season. I just think we're just struggling to get going, basically, and not having the run of good luck that you would want in front of goal, and conceding cheap goals. But we were conceding cheap goals last season as well. They were just masked by the fact that we were scoring more.
Ferguson was always a big sort of advocate. He always sort of said teams have cycles, and they build up and they reach a peak and then they reach a peak and then they come down. Is that maybe the case for this team, that last year was the absolute pinnacle of that team's capabilities and now we're seeing it coming down again?
It might be. I think the important bit for us is whether that peaks and trough, whether the trough we have is still at a level high enough for us to win the league. And I think if you're basing it purely on today, it might be just due to the sort of chaos and mess in the other part of Glasgow. But yeah, I think everything's cyclical, especially with football. I think a lot of people, the vote comparison is Liverpool from 2 seasons ago when they won the league, had a few Champions League runs in a row, and then they sort of fell off. But that was more induced with the loss of a key player in Virgil van Dijk. And I don't think we have that as much. I mean, Haaland was out, but Van Dijk's a colossus for them. In comparative, it would be like us losing maybe McGregor, Morelos, or Davis, someone like that. But I think it's just unfortunate that we have a few players who are very form players themselves, and they're all hitting poor form at the same time. I think Ryan Kent is front and centre in that. He notoriously, last year he started on fire, then throughout the winter and early spring was quite poor, and then he put it back on again coming to the end of the season. So we are naturally just going to see good and bad bits from him. So hopefully this sort of sour, bitter patch festers soon, and we see some classic Ryan Kent, much like Morelos as well. He's also classic. 2 seasons ago, he has been fantastic. First half and terrible second half. And last year, he's a bit off the ball in the first half and then sort of regresses to what we expect or rather progresses to what we expect in the second half. So I think that's probably the optimist view. I think the pessimist view is just the players are worse, but I don't see how that's rational. I have every faith that we'll sort of kick this. And I think a lot of people see the Europa League as a good jumping point for that. I think the expectation that we were going to somehow beat Lyon on Thursday at home was unlikely. It was possible. They're not in the best form, but I think sort of placing all their eggs in that basket with the Lyon fixture probably isn't right. But I do think the doubleheader with Sparta and Brøndby we have is a fairly attractive launching pad for us to sort of get the season started. And if we fail to get some wins in that, then it's very concerning because Brøndby have 8 points from their first 9. They've only won 1 in 9 in the Superliga. And Sparta, albeit our second, they drew with Jablonec today. And if anyone wants to sell to Jablonec game, you know how poor they are. But I think that will offer us a good launching pad, much like this week's cup game. And hopefully we can get some form going because we had quite a good month between the Lyon game and I believe it was the Dundee game. It was a full month with only winning. So hopefully we can repeat that and sort of collect those months together and start going on a few decent months in a row.
Ian, I was looking at sort of Steven Gerrard's comments today, and one really stood out. He said we've had these lessons before, and that's a concern. It was almost like he was indicating that he felt the players weren't learning from those lessons. Whereas last season, if we were conceding goals from set plays or whatever it was, the team was learning and nullifying that. Whereas this season, and it seems to be a sense of deja vu. It felt like the St Johnstone game to me today. When you looked at the stats, the game at St Johnstone, I said earlier on in the first half, it was 85% possession in our favour, and then within 5 minutes of the second half kicking off, we're a goal down. Today, we've had 70% of the possession over the whole 90 minutes. We've had all those shots on goal. They have one shot on goal and managed to sneak away with a point. And so there is a sort of repetitive nature to the mistakes and what's happening. Again, is that a concern? And how does Gerrard fix it? It seems to me that he's noticed that. as a coach, I would expect him to notice it. Michael Beale, Gary McAllister, they've all made comments previously as well that they appreciate that the team aren't at their best at the moment, and they just need to keep focusing. And Gerrard had said a few weeks ago that he'd noticed a sort of thing in training where the tempo was picking up, and he was starting to see that sort of team for last season re-emerging. But I have to say, on the park, it's not really appeared yet. So, how does he fix it? Because he obviously feels there is a problem. To come about and say we've had these lessons before and we're not learning from them, and that's a concern. That would suggest to me that he is concerned, that he's seeing things that he thinks, well, wait a minute, that's not the team that I know, that's not the players that I know.
Yeah, I suppose. Well, if I knew how he fixed it, I guess I wouldn't be sitting here on a Sunday night. But having said that, he's the best. What he has, his fingertips is the option to bring in new players or different players within the squad. So, people have been shouting for Scott Wright to get a chance. Well, because Kent's injured, there's no question about that. He can come into the team. I thought he played okay today, but nothing startling. I'm still not convinced that he's the answer that everyone thinks or other people think he might be. But I think he's a decent enough player, but a good squad player, but not necessarily wouldn't be my first pick. But there's others who could perhaps come in. Bassey perhaps at left back. The Patterson question as well. I wouldn't say necessarily that Tavernier's the cause of any of our major problems. I think he's played okay this season so far, so there's no, for me anyway, I wouldn't say he deserves to be dropped and Patterson brought in, but at the same time, I would like to see Patterson in the team in some way, so I don't know whether or not there's a, sort of Gerrard talked about the playing them both in the same lineup. Whether that's feasible or not, I don't know. But I think he might just need to freshen up a bit. We say we haven't got a major player missing. Well, I would say Ryan Jack is a player that we're really missing this season, and halfway through last season we had the impetus last season, so we didn't miss him quite as much. But I feel that we're asking a lot of Stephen Davis at the age that he's at now to turn out twice a week and play at the highest level, and he's doing, he's on international duty as well. So I think we're asking a lot of him, and I think if Jack can get back into the team fully fit Ryan Jack, and it's a cliche, it would be like a new signing really at this stage of the season, and that would be a real boost, I think, for the midfield, because everything revolves around the midfield. You create more chances, you defend better. So I think there's a stat that, I don't know what the stat is, but when he plays, basically we concede far fewer goals. So that's if nothing else, if we win every game 1-0, then that's fine by me. If he can stop the other team from scoring or help stop the other team from scoring. So I think he has been a big miss for us this season, especially just in terms of the numbers. There's other guys as well, like Bakuna, who we brought in. We've not seen him at all. I don't know. I have no idea whether he's any good or not. I don't know whether he deserves a chance or not. So I think Gerrard would probably be looking at just freshening the team up a bit. So we've got this cup game coming up in midweek. That's the ideal opportunity to do that. However, we saw last season what happened when we brought players in, and it backfired in a couple of occasions where we made too many changes and changes in the wrong places. In my opinion, we brought players in that, or we left players out who we could have really done with keeping in the team. So it's always a risk doing that, but that's the games that generally speaking that's where it will happen.
Patrick, last sort of comment on sort of today's action. Is it? Given how Ange Ball is going at the moment, it really does look like, especially away from home, that Celtic are in real dire straits, and you kind of feel, that's what I felt today. I just felt really frustrated that we'd missed an opportunity to go further ahead of them. And is that something that you're feeling, that we've got a real chance to over the first opening, I don't know, 6 or 7 games. I was looking at it today. I was like, Dundee United game, if we'd won that, and if we had won today, would have been 9 points clear of Celtic. And I'm not saying that's unrecoverable at this stage of the season, but that's a big gap after so few games, and it puts a lot of pressure on them to, they've then just got to churn out result after result just to maintain that 9-point gap. You know what I mean? And one more slip, and then it's 10 points or 11 points, 12 points, whatever. And so the pressure on them just builds and builds and builds. Whereas it feels like we're kind of letting them off the hook. They're not playing particularly well, as I said, especially away from home. And it just feels like we've missed a real opportunity here to have a big gap on them already.
Yeah, I think both sets of fans today leaving the games could use the exact same line. Insert, we lost, but Rangers drew, and we drew, but Celtic lost. I think if it was 9 in a perfect universe, that is almost unsurmountable. That would be, let's say you have parity against the rest of the league in your results. That would require Celtic to win all 3 Old Firms, which looks like that odds from a bookmaker's offer that would be in the hundreds given the Old Firms of the past 2 seasons. But yeah, I think it's frustrating. There's obviously 2 schools of thought. This was an opportunity missed for us to take even more points and further that lead, or it's a good backup to the fact that we weren't on our game. We couldn't finish, but luckily we weren't made to pay that much because Celtic failed to get any points. And from this morning to this evening, we are in a net positive situation of a point more ahead of Celtic. But I think the next month is evidently really important. I think we welcome both Hearts and Hibs at home in the month of October, I think back to back. So that'll be really important, given that it's at home as well. You expect to get 6 points from that. And I think that will be a big sort of statement if we're able to go on the 6 points from that, because Hearts and Hibs have been unproportionately started really well. I mean, the Hibs are on 13 points as well. The 12 points, 3 unbeaten as well, 3 wins and 3 draws. So I think the matter of Celtic is obviously important because they're naturally going to be the running mates for the entire league campaign. But we do have some interesting matches against some early sort of contenders in the next month. But I think Celtic will do what they do. They're sort of in a weird transitional period. And I think what's quite encouraging is that today's loss came from away from home, not against a fantastic team, albeit they played to the game plan is what I heard. But it is an emerging trend that they are very poor away from home, which is quite good. You'd rather see sort of all their losses in one sort of ilk rather than them spread about. So you can see that is a genuine trend emerging as opposed to just random variants. But I think we're in a good position. The fact that our blows are always softened by the fact that Celtic are yet to hit top gear, despite the fact that lots of the media and lots of the noise would make you suspect that they are world beaters and beyond anything what Rangers can conjure up. But no, I think it's disappointing. Is probably the best way to put it. I'm not angry with the team, but disappointing that we weren't able to extend the lead. But it's fine. There'll be more games this season, and I have full confidence going into most Old Firms that we'll have achieve more than parity. And we already are 3 points ahead of them in the Old Firm table with 3 more to go, and I'd expect us to make that 6. And given that, I wouldn't expect us to have many more games like today. Knock on wood.
Yeah, well, we hope. Right, guys, before we move on to discuss other things, I've got to highlight Football Prizes, one of our partners. There's a prize available at the moment. It's a Steven Gerrard signed and framed boot. I'm having a wee look at it now. It's quite an impressive bit of gear, bit of kit. So tickets for this are £5.95. There are 65 tickets available. Of those, there are about 30 remaining. The closing deadline for this is Wednesday, the 22nd of September at 7:30, which is this Wednesday, this coming Wednesday. So get yourself onto footballprizes.co.uk if you want to have a chance of winning that Steven Gerrard signed and framed Rangers boot. As I said, £5.95, 30 of the 65 tickets available if you want to try your hand at that. Iain, on to Thursday night and the Lyon game that we lost there. I was there on Thursday night, and I would admit that we were sort of beaten by the better team. I don't think there's much doubt about that. One thing I would say is I didn't think there was much in the two teams, and I felt I didn't feel like we were completely out of it. Once the second goal went in, it felt pretty difficult. But the annoying thing, probably echoes of today, was the manner of the goals. You know, 2 very, very cheap goals. Brian Kent involved in both, giving away possession quite cheaply. And it goes to show you, you know, the old adage that, you know, you get punished at this level. That's what happened. You know, we gave away possession cheaply and, you know, Leon punished us. So, I mean, I could accept the defeat, but again, there was a slight frustration that the manner of the goals that we conceded and the time that we conceded them, especially the second one, you know, I just felt like that killed the game as a competition. So, yeah, better team, but again, I felt Rangers for last season might have got something out of that game.
I think we could have. I mean, I think in a game like that, there's a clear gulf. I mean, and I don't think anybody could argue against it. I mean, you know, Leon are paying much more money for players than we are. They've got a far bigger and better squad than we have. So the reality is we're not expected to win that game. If you're going to win a game like that or get anything out of a game like that, all your players have to be playing right to the top of their abilities, sometimes beyond what you would expect of them. They have to be up for it. You have to get lucky as well. First half, I thought it was fairly even, to be quite honest. We had a few chances. They had some chances. Second half, it was, although I don't think, we never looked like we were about to get a drubbing, I felt that Leon, once they'd got the second goal, just sat back and weren't too bothered about doing anything else. I mean, we didn't really have anything to overcome that. I mean, they sat and they were comfortable, and I don't think really that we ever threatened them in the second half at all. And again, you know, in some ways, why should we? So we are, you know, operating in a different sphere than they are. Having said that, you know, if the players had been up to the levels that perhaps they were at points last season, then maybe we would have got something out of it. But I do think that, you know, the result was probably what we should have expected from that game, or at least we shouldn't have been surprised to get that result out of it. Frustrating again, because if we had got a goal in the first half, then maybe things would have turned out differently. We'd have had something to fight for and to defend, and we might have been able to do that. But you know, the sort of cliche of, like you say, if you make mistakes, you get punished. It's a cliche for a reason, like most of them are, because that is the case. You know, and we have players that are prone to making mistakes because that's just the level that we operate at. And if we didn't, then they wouldn't be with us because they would move on very quickly to someone else. So we get punished for the mistakes, and you know that's the reality of the situation. I hate the idea of saying I wasn't bothered about losing that game, because obviously I was, but I wasn't. I've seen other games where in Europe where we've really thought that's, you know, we've either been absolutely played off the park or we've lost a game that, you know, we should never have lost. And I don't think either of those were the case on Thursday night. I think we got what we probably should expect to have got out of that game, really.
Patrick, in terms of moving forward and looking at the group at the moment, I mean, I know it's early stages, it's only match day 1, but I mean, when I looked at the group initially, when the draw was made, I was thinking, well, if we could get something against Leon, and then the 2 middle fixtures against Brøndby, you're thinking, well, that could possibly give you 9 points, you know what I mean? And then you're in a strong position to qualify then. Already, you know, it looks like Leon are strong favourites for the group, and it'll probably be between ourselves and I would think Sparta for the second place slot. So how do you feel it leaves us moving forward? Is there still time to recover it? I mean, the different nature of this season's tournament as well. You know, second place has to now play a playoff rather than automatically going into the knockout stages of the Europa League. So how do you feel? Are you feeling confident about moving forward, or again does it tie in with this feeling that, you know, this team has peaked last season and it's maybe going to come down another way?
Well, I think it was a litmus test to see our credentials to finish first. Because if you were going to finish first above Leon, you were going to take something and most likely win at home. And I think, I mean, we felt that speaking critically, but I think a fail is probably a bit too hard because I don't think there's that much between the two teams. They obviously deserved the win, but I didn't think we were that poor. But no, I think I would expect us to finish second, and there'd be a pretty clear distinction between. I managed to watch the Bromby Sparta game in full, and it was one of quite a little hyperbole, but it was one of the worst and most boring football matches I've watched. I watched the highlights as well before I watched it in full, and 2 minutes of the 4-minute highlight package were substitutions. So I genuinely, whether it be the Rangers of last year or even the Rangers the year before, I don't think either of them at home. There was no excuse to not take 6 points, and then albeit Sparta is an interesting game because we won't be playing in front of fans because the Sparta fans racially abused Alain Choumeni of Monaco during their Champions League qualifying round, so it'll be played in front of an empty stadium, which is a net positive because there'll be no fans and it's an away game. So you would expect perhaps maybe some sort of conspiracy theorists if Rangers get a good result that they can't play in front of fans. And then Brøndby naturally will be slightly more challenging of an away day because they have fantastic fans, really nice stadium. But on a personnel and playing wise, they have massive deficiencies compared to Rangers. They've sort of sold most of their best players, and as I mentioned earlier, are at like around a point a game, 9 games into their season. So I'm still very confident that will come second. There is a question as to what is better, finishing third and then going down and playing in the Conference League, where you play a team who is hypothetically worse and you have a better chance of going far and adding points to the coefficient, or coming second and then playing in that sort of what is now the round of 32 playoff round, which whoever wins plays around 16, but you will be playing a team like a Sporting or like a Porto, so a team who are quite good as well, the third place finish from each UCL group. So it is interesting, but I would back the team most definitely. I put money on them to come second at this point and probably hover around early double digits to late single digits, around 9 to 12 points.
I suppose what also might be helpful is the fact that if Lyon have already qualified by the last game, then what have they got to play for in that final game? So that could be in our favour as well if it comes down to that. But you would like to hope that with things would have been sorted before then, that last game would be a dead rubber in some ways.
I'm glad I'm coming to you with this one Ian, because you used to work in the sports press up here. This controversy, in inverted commas, around Neil Lennon and Chris Sutton not gaining access. It'd be good to get your views on that, because I don't know. I mean, the thought of Neil Lennon seeking legal action is quite laughable to me. But there's also a part of me thinking, I mean, I don't think it was security concerns. This line that Rangers are playing, they were a security concern. I think Neil Lennon would have been welcomed on Thursday night. I'd have certainly bought him a beer after last season. You know what I mean? I'd have shook his hand after last season. And Chris Sutton's been to Ibrox before, so I'm not convinced about the security stuff. I think it's more linked to maybe how Sutton behaves as a pundit and some of the lines that he's taken and how critical he is of the club. So it'd be good to get your views on it, because obviously you used to work in the football media up here, and people who I'm speaking to are sort of still in that media sphere. They're quite critical of Rangers at the moment, but obviously supporters are very defensive of the club's stance and supportive of it. And I'm kind of stuck between the two, if I'm being honest with you. I can completely understand why Rangers are taking this stance. However, you do kind of wonder if it's a self-harming position, long term, and how many bridges you're burning. But again, I come back to it. It feels to me that Rangers have been getting treated differently from the media in this country for a while. So therefore, I think Rangers are now taking on the stance that, we're going to treat you differently. But it doesn't feel ideal, but I understand it, if you know what I mean. It would be good to get your perspective.
It is a difficult one, because I find this whole thing a bit of a distraction, and I wish we weren't embroiled in it at all, to be quite honest. And I understand why fans want to take a stance, and I also understand why the media are saying that this is out of order. This situation with Sutton and Lennon is different to some of the other issues that have been coming up this season, where that has something to do with money and something to do with other aspects. But with them, I don't know. I just feel that by banning them, Rangers have basically played into their hands. If you want to, Chris Sutton, I'm sure, just absolutely loved the idea that he was being banned from Ibrox and was able to go out and say that. And, it just feeds into a whole sort of narrative that I just don't think we need. I just feel that, it's one thing having behind the scenes issues with certain journalists or certain media and dealing with them however you want to deal with them. When it starts to become a public argument and played out in the social media or in actual media, I just think, do we need this? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know you said you wanted me to give you a perspective. I'm uncomfortable with the idea in general of banning journalists, but at the same time, I completely understand why some people should be banned. Or why people would say that some people should be banned. When it comes to guys like Lennon and Sutton, I just think all you're doing with them is just giving them something to gloat about in some ways, and it's a badge of honour for them in some ways as well. And I don't think it does anybody any favours at all in at Rangers. So I don't know what the reasoning behind it was. If it was a security issue, then fair enough. If it was just out of spite or just to punish them or something like that, I just wonder what the long-term gain to that is, and how the whole thing is expected to pan out, because it just seems to be a distraction, and we're getting involved in stupid arguments and petty stuff that I just don't think as a club that we necessarily need to. I don't think we should be giving Chris Sutton, for instance, the satisfaction of doing that. But I mean, that's just a personal opinion, but I don't think it's a big press freedom thing in his case, because he wasn't even there to cover our game, so that's not really an issue. It's not as if we're saying you can cover our game but you can't. It's purely you're not welcome in our stadium, and for whatever reason, or you're not allowed in our stadium for whatever reason. I just don't know what the benefit of it is, other than sort of a little bit of playing to the gallery, and that I don't know if that's necessarily the best way forward.
Maybe yourself, Patrick, is it necessary, or as Iain says, unnecessary noise?
I think it's a bit of a side event. What I did find funny is that on the basis if it was a security concern, some people were saying that if Neil Allen was banned with a security concern, it's outrageous because he would be welcome with open arms and would get a standing ovation if he ever looked out of the gantry, which I found really funny, because I thought that would be true if Neil Lennon emerged from the press box. He would be met with rapturous applause from the Rangers fans. Chris Sutton, on the other hand, I mean, a lot of people see him as just sort of adding fuel to the fire. I don't think that necessarily revoking their press privileges does anything. I think it's quite funny, but as Iain said, it does kind of play into his hand. You saw he was probably waiting to tweet out, didn't miss much when Rangers lost. But the thing I also liked was one of the guys from TalkSport saying we should stop covering Rangers, and I think that would do a lot of health to everyone involved with Rangers. Going TalkSport are cesspit and not great, and sort of run the sort of Scottish football's terrible Rangers, that sort of thing. So if this came with TalkSport not covering Rangers, I would have been happy. But in general, I think it's a bit of a sidetrack, which isn't necessary. I think, as Iain said, it really just does play into the hand of people who you might consider trolls or whatever. But I think the idea in which I think Graham Spears said it's verging on 1950s Russia and China, that some sort of overarching crackdown on press freedoms and ability to freedom of speech is probably a bit over the top, but yeah, I think it's just a bit unnecessary. It's
hardly unique as well. I mean, Rangers are not the only club that bans certain journalists. I mean, there was somebody from Soccer AM, I don't no idea who the guy is, said something earlier about in a similar vein. Maybe we should stop covering Rangers now if they're going to pick and choose who they allow to cover it. Well, they didn't say that when Manchester United were banning the BBC from covering Manchester United. Nobody ever said that everyone else should stop covering Manchester United because it's an infringement of the press freedom because they're banning the BBC. So they pick and choose, obviously, when it's when it matters really. And the reality is that lots of teams ban journalists all the time, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. To single out Rangers for it just seems to me to be, just having to go Rangers for the sake of it, as is often the case, and maybe that's why we are where we are.
I mean, I remember. I'm having a wee chuckle at myself when I see a lot of Celtic fans comment on them at the moment because, I remember them holding press conferences in Baird's Bar. Do you remember that? So that no journalist would. If any journalist, I think Hugh Keevins asked a really controversial question in some sort of bruiser just the street. So, I mean, as you say, there has been instances in the past that, clubs have, removed press privileges or banned certain individuals. But I think it's more the reasons given for this one, the security reasons aspect. I kind of thought that's a bit strange, and I don't buy that for a minute. I think that's a line. I think there's other reasons for it, maybe reasons that are behind the scenes. I don't know, but I kind of have to say I agree with both of you. Even though you're a wee bit, I get it up. Don't want them in Ibrox. When you look at it with a sort of level head, you're like, well, what does it actually achieve other than a bit of,
The other thing as well is the other thing as well, and fan, we're all irrational when it comes to being a fan. Fans want action taken against journalists and they want to crack it down. They're like, get it up, we don't need you anymore, which is fair enough. At the same time, people want positive coverage, and in the run. I read something somewhere in the run up to the Old Firm game saying Rangers should be pulling in all their favours to make sure there's pressure on the referee. So we make sure, because his previous mistakes in Old Firm games, and I thought, well, how are you going to do that? Because who are you going to turn to say, get a nice wee story in, a friendly journalist? Well, if you're going to alienate everyone, then that's not going to happen. So you have to balance it. There's got to be. That's the whole reason we have PR people, is because we need to build relationships with. It's not a question of just saying burn the bridges. You need to get in. You can get rid of the ones you don't like, or freeze out the ones you don't like. But you need, at the same time, there needs to be a policy of cultivating the journalists that you do want, and you need to have relationships with these newspapers and media organisations. Otherwise, it's always going to be a constant stream of negative publicity against the club. So, I don't think just saying, like, chucking it all out in one go is a good idea. I think, there has to, if there is going to be some sort of action taken against individuals, then you have to balance that up with, not just throwing the baby out with the bathwater and going in and just, you need to cultivate relationships and need to have relationships. And if you don't, then longer term, it's not a good idea.
Right, guys, on to Wednesday night's game. Going to quickly cover that before we wrap things up for tonight. Patrick, obviously, Livingston beat Celtic today. I know we were saying earlier on that Celtic away are. They're not great at the moment. They're a very poor side away from home. But you would imagine that Livingston would take confidence from that, and especially when you look at what Motherwell done against today. And I know Iain was talking earlier on about there's a chance to freshen up the side, and maybe that's what's needed. But it also, would you trust anyone at this particular moment in time? Would you want to freshen up the side at this particular moment in time? Because it's an important game. You don't want to lose it. If you lose it, it puts more pressure on Steven Gerrard and the players and all that kind of thing. So it's kind of a tricky one. You want to win it, but you also want to freshen things up. What do you do?
Luckily, we've played them at home already this season, and we came out favourable. Albeit there was a sort of period of lull between 15 minutes before and after the half-time whistle. So there is some confidence knowing that we beat them 3-0, albeit they obviously coming off win against Celtic at home. How much you attribute that to the pitch and the nature of playing in front of, they don't really have a home crowd, but mainly the pitch, the plastic pitch makes quite a difference. I think the one thing you have to do is the defence needs some sort of continuity, more so than anywhere else on the pitch. So I'd be surprised. There might be some shots for Basic's play, just given his sort of Barisic has looked a bit lethargic, albeit his delivery has been quite good. But I'd be surprised if there's any sort of variation and deviance from a back four of Tavernier, Balogun, Goldson and Barisic, albeit the two fullbacks could be switched. Patterson has been sort of devoid of playing time. And that's something which is inopportune for a player at this sort of stage of development. But I think the one thing you can't see is that I really, as much as I like Stephen Davis, I don't think you can see him play on Wednesday. He's been already being run to the ground, and I don't think the idea of playing him in 4 games within 10 days is sustainable. And I think we're really running the risk of him getting some sort of long-term, even maybe debilitating injury, which will have serious effects given his age and his ability to recover. Much like I would be surprised if Alan McGregor plays. I think Robbie McCrory might get a run out because he was somewhat convincing and quite good in the 2 games he played. But I would be surprised if Davis and McGregor play. But I do think it's an opportunity to get a few players in, but I would be very surprised if there's any wholesale changes, just given the fact that despite it only being quarterfinal of the Betfred Cup, there is some sort of outward pressure from everyone, given the fact that Gerrard, rightly or wrongly, has garnered this sort of reputation as a manager who doesn't do well in domestic cup competitions. And I don't think you can argue with that label, given the fact that we've failed to win any of the cups when he's here. And I think that's probably something a monkey wants to get off his back, most definitely, given the fact that depending on what happens in the coming year or two, he might not get too many more opportunities and he might be poached by a team down south. So I think there'll be some sort of deviation from the lineup we see traditionally, but I'd be very surprised if we see any of the players who are sort of aging towards their last season or 2 play. And I think this is a perfect opportunity to get Bakuna 90 minutes, maybe get a 90 minutes on Lundstrom and see one of the goalies for 90 minutes.
Iain, again, given that you're of a similar vintage to myself, I can remember going to the Scottish Cup final in 1992, and we beat Airdrie. I think it was 2-1, and I actually scrape a ticket for the Airdrie end that day, and I very nearly never got in because the policeman noticed I had a Rangers shirt under my denim shirt, but got in, saw them win it, and it was the first time in 11 years the Rangers had won the Scottish Cup. And I genuinely thought that day, well, that'll never happen again. We'll never see them not winning the Scottish Cup for that length of time again. And here we are. We're 10 years since we won any domestic cup. Now, I know there's reasons behind that. 2012 and everything that happened after that. But it's a long, long time to go without winning any domestic cup. And although we've had Scottish Cup hoodoos in the past, we were habitual winners in the League Cup, and it would be good to see one of them come back at least. It's been so long, and this presents us an opportunity to get to another semi-final and give us an opportunity of doing that.
Yeah, I wasn't that bothered last season about the cup games, other than you don't like to lose games, but my feeling last season was priority was the league. And that was all that mattered, really. I think now, we can be a bit more sort of greedy, and I think a cup, it's a good day out apart from anything else for the supporters, and winning a trophy where you stand and you lift the cup. It's a great, it's a good day basically, and I think it's good for the players as well, and it fosters that sort of winning feeling as well. So yeah. I think the cups this season are much more important than they were last season. I wasn't that bothered last season, but this season I think, as it continually, if we get knocked out of the cup on Wednesday, that'll perpetuate that narrative that Patrick was talking about as well, that Gerrard can't do it in cups as well. So, I think overall it's important for moving on for this season, that we progress, and winning the cup is. It's a good thing. In some ways, it's a bonus, but at the same time, when if you win the league, and hopefully we'll perhaps win the league again this season, you want to build on that and get more than just the win trophy. So yeah, definitely more important this season than it was last season.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I would love to. Well, I might not get a ticket for a final, but I would love to get that sort of feeling again, back at Hampden and seeing them winning a a domestic trophy. Guys, looking at the time and looking at the agenda, that's us for this week. So a big thanks to Iain and Patrick for their contributions. Brilliant stuff from them. We'll try and get a preview show out on Tuesday night for the Livingston game, and we'll see what we can do next week. Obviously, we'll be back next Sunday with the flagship show as well. Hopefully a bit earlier than tonight. Apologies, that was my IT that let us down. But in the meantime, get yourself onto the Gersnet website and forums at www.gersnet.co.uk. Until next time, guys, bye for now.